I don't have time to do that. How do you have time to do that? How do you have time while you're running the world to be tweeting that you don't like talk show hosts?
Yeah.
That is so
crazy.
Crazy.
And he was going after like Letterman too for some reason. Like he posted something about Letterman.
Because Letterman went off about him, and Letterman said it was a criminal organization. You can't support in any way, shape, or form the government censoring speech.
No.
Because
this city of the future that's being built on the mass grave of all of these people that we're funding, that's what it's about. An AI city of the future built on a mass grave. You're funding that. Oh, Jimmy Kimmel said a joke that people don't like. Let's see what this is. We're not even a year into this administration. It's very obvious that this whole thing, the wheels are coming off. Tucker Carlson's become a liberal hero. Is that because things are going well? Is that because things are going well? Is that happening because things have gone in the right direction? It's wild to watch. Every liberal friend I know in LA, okay, cocoons themselves in a blanket, drinks a matcha, and watches Candace Owens for 19 hours a day. And I like Candace. But is that because they're doing a great job in Washington? Is that because things are going well?
Yeah, I think we've been pretty staunchly in favor of free speech. And it is funny to watch right-wing people just become left-wing people. Because I said something about how you're a snowflake if you think you should be. If you agree with this, that's some snowflake shit. And somebody was like, you clearly don't even know what the First Amendment means. And that's exactly what left-wing people used to tell me. Yeah. Freedom of speech doesn't mean freedom from consequences.
Right.
So y'all have just switched.
Yeah.
Now, again, this has nothing to do with what happened to Charlie Kirk. That's a horrendous thing. Let's get that out of the way. But in terms of censorship, freedom of speech is more under attack now, honestly, than I think it has ever been.
So it turns out the Rogansphere, including the man himself, Rogan, is starting to realize that maybe, just maybe, Trump might be a dictator. Now, if you've been even remotely online, you've most likely seen the news about Jimmy Kimmel being suspended after a joke he made during his opening monologue about Trump's reaction to Charlie Kirk getting assassinated. This led to a bunch of conservatives losing their mind, including FCC Commissioner Brendan Carr, who essentially issued a mob-style threat to ABC on Benny Johnson's show, saying the following.
We've seen, but frankly, when you see stuff like this, I mean, look, we can do this the easy way or the hard way. These companies can find ways to change conduct, to take action, frankly, on Kimmel, or, there's going to be additional work for the FCC ahead.
Now, I should point out before we move any further that Jimmy Kimmel is back to hosting the late night show due to the massive backlash and widespread boycott of ABC and Disney, which obviously led to the decision to bring him back. So now that we're all caught up with what happened, let's start with Tim Dillon and see what his reaction was to Jimmy Kimmel getting suspended.
Okay? I'm going to play the joke he made. It's a weird joke, and it's a not factually correct thing, but here's why I'm going to not only defend it, but I think it is ridiculous to pull this guy off the air. I think it's ridiculous to pretend it was about money. I think it's ridiculous to pretend that it's not a political hit job. It's a political hit job, and we know it. Was ABC, is it the cash cow it was 10, 20 years ago? Absolutely not. We know late night TV is dying. We know all of that. That's not why this show got yanked. And pretending it is an insult to people's intelligence, okay? It's an insult to people's intelligence. This was a hit, politically motivated hit job, okay? It's something that most people who talk for a living should care about. If you talk for a living, if you're making money, entertaining people, informing people, whatever it is you think you're doing out there, anybody who's doing that should care a little bit about this. Let's watch his joke, and then let's talk about the fallout.
We hit some new lows over the weekend with the MAGA gang desperately trying to characterize this kid who murdered Charlie Kirk as anything other than one of them and doing everything they can to score political points from it. In between the finger pointing, there was grieving. On Friday, the White House flew the flags at half-staff, which got some criticism. But on a human level, you can see how hard the president is taking this.
My condolences on the loss of your friend Charlie Kirk. May I ask, sir, personally, how are you holding up over the last day and a half, sir?
I think very good. And by the way, right there, you see all the trucks? They've just started construction of the new ballroom for the White House, which is something they've been trying to get, as you know, for about 150 years. And it's going to be a beauty.
Yes. Okay. He's at the fourth stage of grief, construction. Demolition, construction.
Alright, so let me just say, it's pretty obvious that the joke was about Trump and not about Charlie Kirk, but of course you had a bunch of conservatives being drama queens, making it seem like Kimmel was making fun of Charlie Kirk and not Trump, which is just a disingenuous take. Another issue conservatives had with Kimmel was that he classified the shooter as being MAGA, which realistically speaking we do not know where the shooter sits politically, so that is a fair criticism. The only problem is that conservatives did the exact same thing. Within hours of the shooting, a bunch of right-wing figures were saying the shooter was left-wing despite there being no information to support that. Then you had conservatives claiming the shooter was trans, then the bullets were trans, then the roommate was trans, basically trying to find any way possible to put this on trans people. So if right-wingers want to criticize Kimmel for spreading misinformation about the shooter's political agenda, I think they should also apply that standard to their own political party. But of course that's never going to happen because their political party's main fuel is lying. Now let's go back to Tim Dillon and see what he thought.
So here's the thing. Not a bad, it's a fun joke. The setup to the joke where it's like they're doing everything they can to pretend this guy's not a MAGA guy. Nobody thought this guy was a MAGA guy. People thought he was a far-right internet kid or a far-left internet kid. No one thought he was like a card-carrying member of the MAGA group. So he's presenting the premise is false, whatever. Highlighting Trump's absurd reaction when asked about Charlie Kirk, you start talking about a ballroom. Dude, I mean, it's the president's own words. And then he does, joke about he's at the fifth stage of grief, fourth stage of grief, construction, whatever. It's kind of, now listen, it's being done in a climate that's very charged emotionally. A guy got shot in the face. His wife and kid will watch that for the rest of their life. His wife and children. The reactions to it, some of them were abhorrent. Some of the reactions to that were, including some of the mainstream media obits, were wild. Scoring political points on the guy with a hole in his neck. It's insane. And it's radicalized a lot of people.
So I actually agree, watching the right's reaction to this shooting, how they immediately tried to score political points and even use it to stir up violence against the left was disturbing. The proper response should have been to condemn political violence against any figure, whether on the left or the right. I also saw someone being interviewed on TV claiming that because Charlie Kirk supports free speech, anyone who criticizes him should be banned from ever speaking again. I mean, that's not only absurd, but also wildly hypocritical. Now, I don't think Tim Dillon meant it that way. His criticism is probably aimed more at the left than the right, which is pretty much what I'd expect. Now, here's where things start to get interesting, because for the first time in a long time, we hear Tim Dillon criticize Trump directly.
Your tax dollars are going so that real estate developers can build luxury condos with like floating bathtubs in Gaza. There's no way anyone elected Trump for this. There's zero possibility that people elected Donald Trump so that their tax dollars could go to luxury real estate development in Gaza or in Qatar. There's zero way that any of this, take a look at that. To be fair, it does look nice. To be fair, it's a little bit of an AI rendering. But nobody elected him for that. And now if you criticize that, they'll take your visa if you're a foreign student. They'll just shut you down. So shut the fuck up. Get out of here. You know? So Kimmel was losing money for ABC. Maybe. I don't know. I heard he wasn't. I heard he wasn't making a lot of money, but I heard he wasn't losing it. But by the way, whether he was or he wasn't, who cares? He was losing it last week and he wasn't off the air. It's directly related to that joke. The FCC commissioner said it. I don't think it was a particularly good thing for Jimmy Kimmel to say this guy was MAGA. He wasn't MAGA. By the way, it's easily correctable. You can correct the record without destroying someone's ability to speak. This is something that, you try to die on the hill of this. Now, the only thing left in this country, unfortunately, seems to be power. Everybody thinking that Jimmy Kimmel being removed and indefinitely suspended from ABC means that you are winning, you're a fool. Your tax dollars are going to build casinos in Gaza. You're not winning. This is not what winning looks like, by the way. Kimmel had planned to address Carr's comments on his show Wednesday night, according to people familiar with the matter. Before his on-air appearance, Dana Walden, co-chairman of Disney Entertainment, spoke to the host about his plan, the people said. After the conversation between Kimmel and Walden, she and other senior executives thought that the star's approach could make the situation worse. People familiar with their conversation said. I mean, one of these issues is that the Kimmel writer's room is a monolith. I don't think there's anybody in there that voices any alternative opinion here and says, maybe we should slow down with this. Again, not a reason for the government to get involved and for the president to be threatening other late night hosts. But there's an element of the right wing that wants this stuff to keep going on. And it's because they felt culturally powerless for a very long time.
I mean, I don't agree with that statement. Saying that the reason a lot of right-wingers wanted this to keep going is because they felt powerless for a very long time is a bit like playing the victim card without actually being victims. The Red Pill movement and figures like Andrew Tate were as popular as anyone could be, not just in the US but globally. And then you have one of the biggest podcasts in the world hosted by a right-winger. Of course, I'm talking about Joe Rogan. So this idea that right-wingers felt culturally powerless for a very long time is a bit delusional. Not to mention, Tim Dillon himself has quite a huge podcast and a significant influence overall, and a big part of that is because of his right-wing endorsement.
And they want these institutions to kind of bend the knee to the president. And it's happened in other countries. People bring up Hungary and Viktor Orban and all that stuff. Obviously, people like Putin. Nobody wants to live in a country where a late night comedian is, subject to removal because he says something that the president of the United States doesn't like. Also, here's a sidebar. Is Jimmy Kimmel the deep state? Tulsi Gabbard goes out, who I like, but she goes out and goes, Obama's guilty of treason. And they don't really present a ton of evidence. And then they just drop it and they move on. And then they go, well, this guy and that guy and this guy and that guy. And then the Epstein files, they all vote to not release them. And then they go, well, Jimmy Kimmel, let's get him out of here. And then, Steve Bannon's got a documentary with 20 hours about Epstein. We'll release that. You got all these hours. Nobody over there, they all think you're really, really dumb. And they're treating you the way you treat a young child who wants something that they're not going to get. You try to distract them with other things. You can see, I don't have kids. I'm around people that have kids all the time, and they'll go, I want to do this, I want to do this, I want to do that. And then you go, hey, what about this? Take a look at that. Isn't this cool? Look, a dog. This is that. This is that. I mean, Kesh Patel is walking around like the most compromised person on earth. If Kesh Patel is not afraid of something, I don't know what fear is. These people are running around. They're going to unmask everything and expose everything and whatever. Again, I wasn't the one who ran on that premise. They were. And none of that has happened. In fact, Whatever cover-up's going on, they're extending it. They've now become a part of it. They are helping facilitate it. Every comment under everything these people post is, what the fuck are you doing? Speaking of a 7-Eleven, I don't think Kash Patel could solve a robbery at a 7-Eleven without fucking it up, by the way. It's just, the guy's the head of the FBI.
Yeah, well, I think a big part of why so many people in the Trump administration are incompetent is because the only requirement they need to meet is kissing Trump's ass. And that can land you positions like the head of the FBI. Realistically, a bunch of these people are just podcasters or MAGA influencers. So when you put them in positions of power, of course things are going to derail pretty quickly. Now, with that being said, I do think Tim Dillon speaking on this issue was, at least for me, quite unexpected and a pleasant surprise. I don't expect him to go full-on anti-MAGA. I don't think that's ever going to happen. But at least there's some criticism of what Trump was trying to do with the Kimmel situation. Now, let's move on to the head of the pack, the guy who basically helped put Trump in the ultimate position of power, Joe Rogan himself.
Speaking of adapting, like this whole Jimmy Kimmel situation that is happening right now.
Yeah, wild.
Very wild. Okay, first of all, the FCC is, you have to have a license to broadcast, which is kind of crazy when you think about what that means now. Because, like, what does it mean? It used to mean that you used to have a license to broadcast because you were going to influence so many people. They had to make sure that you were on the up and up, right? So they had to make sure that you didn't swear. So if you had a license and you were on CBS or NBC or ABC, you could not swear, right? That was the rule. And then on came cable. And somehow or another, cable
changed the game.
Is a different thing, right? Because cable, you just... You have to pay for it, I guess, so it's different. And so then some of the channels you don't have to pay for. It used to be the only ones that swore were like HBO, where you had to pay for. And then all of a sudden it became kind of any of them because they realized, like, hey, we don't, like FX, we can swear, guys. Like, we only don't swear because we want to think of ourselves as TV.
Right.
But HBO was like, you know, with The Sopranos, with HBO comedy specials, in the beginning, that was a big one. You could just swear. Movies, you didn't have to bleep anything out. Just wild. And so these, what you're dealing with even, like, first of all, I definitely don't think that the government should be involved ever in dictating what a comedian can or cannot say in a monologue. That's fucking crazy.
It's crazy.
Now, if the problem is the companies, if they're being pressured by the government, so if that's real, and if people on the right are like, yeah, go get them, oh my God, you're crazy. You're crazy for supporting this. Because this will be used on you. You don't think that the fucking globalist lizard people who run the world are sitting here going, great, what do we got, 3 years? We'll wait this out. We'll wait this out. Yeah. Let them say the government should be involved in censoring people's speech. Yeah. Let them support that. Let these fucking dumbasses, because Jimmy Kimmel's a leftist, let these dumbasses think it's a good idea and we should celebrate that.
That's the most...
So it seems like Joe Rogan's brain started working again because he is correct. The idea that Trump and the FCC would only use censorship against left-wing voices is naive. Sure, that belief might help you sleep at night, but in reality, this kind of power could be used against anyone who dares to speak out against Trump and his regime, including right-wingers who might not agree with some of his policies.
Internet, you can't do anything about. Look, I certainly think that for Jimmy Kimmel, all this does is help him.
Yeah.
It makes his show bigger, much more support. I'm sure there's a lot of hate as well, which is not fun. But at the end of the day, if the show comes back, which this is my suspicion is they suspend it for a short amount of time and then they bring it back. And then there's a lot of lawyers going back and forth in meetings and rooms. And somehow or another it gets worked out that he has a show. He comes back to a standing ovation. Donald Trump tweets mean shit about him, and then the world moves on.
This show still sucks. It still sucks.
I think that is also fucking insane. I don't have time to do that. How do you have time to do that? How do you have time while you're running the world to be tweeting that you don't like talk show hosts?
Yeah.
That is so
crazy.
Crazy.
And he was going after, like, Letterman, too, for some reason. Like, he posted something about Letterman.
Because Letterman went off about him, and Letterman said it was a criminal organization. you can't support in any way, shape, or form the government censoring speech.
No.
Because once they start doing, it's just like you shouldn't be on ABC anymore. It's like, don't go on AM radio. It's not worth it. Like, why do you want to have an AM radio show? Like, if somebody offered me an AM radio show, and I'd be like, really? Is it a good deal? Yes, it's a good deal. It's a wonderful contract. You're going to get health care and all these benefits and this and that, a 401k. But you can't say this. You can't say that. I'd be like, what?
Yeah.
Why would I do that?
I'm out.
Like, this is 2025. Why
They're
would
like,
I do
well, you
AM
used to
radio?
want it. You used to love it. I think
used
that's
to
what.
want it.
Well,
I get what Rogan is saying, but you should be able to hold any job without fearing you'll lose it just for speaking out against the President of the United States or criticizing him in any way, shape, or form. If that becomes the norm, it sounds less like the US and more like North Korea.
This is like all boiling up with this Charlie Kirk thing and this Jimmy Kimmel thing. The Jimmy Kimmel thing is, unfortunately, I think what he was trying to do was just set up a joke. He was trying to knock on the MAGA people, but also set up a joke, which was good. It was very funny. Like where he showed the president's response to Charlie Kirk. He's
yeah,
like,
the new ballroom they're building.
and he said like the fourth stage of grief is construction.
It's a fantastic
And
joke.
he also said that's not how a grown adult reacts to the death of his friend. It's like a 4-year-old mourns the loss of a goldfish.
Yeah.
Very funny.
It's a great joke. He was trying to set it up.
Yeah. But he set it up in a way that, like, okay, you're saying something that's actually factually inaccurate according to the narrative. Now, let's be real clear. I don't necessarily think they know what's going on yet. There's a lot of weird shit going on with this.
I know.
So I agree with Rogan. I do think the joke was funny. And once again, let's be clear. The joke was about Trump, not about Charlie Kirk. The whole premise of that joke was to highlight how out of touch with reality Trump is and how much of a narcissist he is. To the point where he cannot go more than a day without bringing the conversation back to himself and boasting about how great he is for finally making the White House ballroom happen. Now, the conversation between Rogan and Santino continues by pointing out how strange this case was and how many conspiracy theories surround the shooting. I think a big part of the problem and why all this happened is the lack of competent leadership at the FBI. I'm not saying there aren't a lot of weird things about this case, but I do think many of these questions could have been answered if there were a capable FBI director, which Kash Patel clearly is not. The guy seemed more focused on his Twitter following than on solving who the shooter actually was. So with someone like that as the head of the FBI, of course there are going to be a lot of unanswered questions. Now, with that being said, let's move on to the Flagrant guys, because they were also disturbed by the censorship aimed at Jimmy Kimmel.
But we just found out that Jimmy Kimmel got fired after we finished recording. We wanted to address it. First things first, we have to address Charlie Kirk getting murdered. Nobody here condones that behavior. That's horrendous. You cannot kill anybody for what they say. So just so you know our beliefs, we're going to have a lot of laughs after. But then the Jimmy Kimmel thing just broke, so we have to address that.
Yeah.
So is this crazy? This is crazy, right?
What exactly are the facts of what happened?
Jimmy Kimmel, well, I'm not the fat guy. You know, I read it to you, forgot it already. Jimmy Kimmel, you got it?
No.
You're facts. Miles is facts. Jimmy Kimmel said something on the Kimmel Show about, like, the MAGA people trying to make the Charlie Kirk shooter a leftist, but we all know he was MAGA. That's essentially what he said.
Yeah.
FCC chairman says, hey, you guys should watch your fucking mouth, essentially, because there could be consequences. Then two big affiliates, I think NextGen and Sinclair Media, both say we're taking Jimmy Kimmel indefinitely off the air. So, like, if you live in, I don't know, Poughkeepsie, and your affiliate is Sinclair, you're not going to get to see Jimmy Kimmel. That's just what it is. Because there's all these little local affiliates that control the channels. And then ABC eventually just says, you know what? We are pulling Jimmy Kimmel completely off the air. The thing that is interesting is I think NextGen is trying to go through this huge merger with another company, and that merger requires FCC approval. So if the FCC is putting pressure on them, like, hey, there could be consequences, that's going to prompt you to be like, you know what, let's just pull Jimmy Kimmel off the air. So this seems like a big attack on free speech. And yeah, I think we've been pretty staunchly in favor of free speech. And it is funny to watch right-wing people just become left-wing people. Because I said something about how you're a snowflake if you think you should be. If you agree with this, that's some snowflake shit. And somebody was like, you clearly don't even know what the First Amendment means. And that's exactly what left-wing people used to tell me. Freedom of speech doesn't mean freedom from consequences.
Right.
So y'all have just switched.
Yeah.
What these guys miss or simply refuse to acknowledge is where the power actually lies. When the left was doing the censoring, it was individuals and private platforms making those calls, which meant the power remained in the hands of the people. But when right-wingers do it, it is the government enforcing the censorship. That strips power from the people and silences their voices under a tyrannical North Korea-style system. Those two are very different things. One still operates within the people's sphere, the other is directly against them.
Again, this has nothing to do with what happened to Charlie Kirk. That's a fucking horrendous thing. Let's get that out of the way. But in terms of censorship, freedom of speech is more under attack now, honestly, than I think it has ever been. I don't know if that's me being hyperbolic.
Maybe. I mean, as far as what Jimmy said, I think it's untrue, or at least unfair.
I don't agree with what he said. I don't like what he said. We should also say that. I don't agree with what he said. I don't like what he said. He should be allowed to say it. And what happened to Charlie Kirk is worse. Charlie Kirk should have been allowed to say the things we didn't like. Jimmy Kimmel should be allowed to say the things we didn't like. That's just what America is.
Yeah.
And freedom of speech, I've seen it truly under attack in India, where it's like you can go to jail. This is closer to that than I think what the left was doing.
Yeah.
Which is like the FCC putting, as much as we didn't like left-wing shit, like far left policy, or far left whatever, thoughts, it wasn't like Joe Biden was putting pressure on somebody to get canceled for saying You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
That's what makes this different and scarier to me and closer to what India has. Then that's what makes it an actual attack on free speech to me.
Yeah.
Jimmy's comments were inaccurate, but that was recorded on Monday when we weren't still clear yet all of the motives. I think things were still unclear, but he shouldn't have rushed to judge.
He shouldn't have said it. That's, I think we will just say that you then don't rush to judgment.
Exactly.
But we all make mistakes. Every one of us has said a thing that's stupid or whatever. That is part of doing this thing. Jimmy Kimmel's been on air for decades. Of course, he said multiple stupid things. I've said multiple stupid things in 8 years of doing a podcast. You should be allowed to say stupid things.
Stupid things every day.
We're saying stupid stuff on this episode.
Yeah, there's things on this episode that...
What's really ironic about Trump trying to cancel Jimmy Kimmel is that so many comedians once claimed that when Trump got into office, comedy would be back and nobody would censor comedians anymore. Well, that turned out to be complete bullshit. The only comedy that's back is the kind that kisses Trump's ass and never dares to criticize him. Now, of course, I don't agree with everything these guys said, but I'll give them credit for at least calling it out. They understood that this doesn't just affect Kimmel, it affects anyone who has the guts to criticize the cult leader. Now, I saved the worst for last, which is Andrew Schulz. If you're even slightly aware of him, you know that whenever something big happens online, he always puts one of those cringy monologues that nobody asked for. I'm sure some people find them funny, but personally they're just not my cup of tea when it comes to the kind of comedy I'd watch.
Hello everybody. Now before we begin, let me just address this horrible ponytail. It is for a movie I'm filming. I've been called many things. Chris Anal, Sri Lankan short order cook. I look like I should be tying a woman to the train tracks. These are offensive. They hurt my feelings, but you should be allowed to say them. And that gets into this conversation. Last week, Charlie Kirk's tragic death exposed that our political values have eroded faster than Kash Patel's interest in the Epstein list. The discourse between right and left is officially just beat the other side, even if it means becoming exactly what you hate. It started with the left's reaction to Charlie's assassination. Surely people on the left that have constantly been reminding us of the dangers of fascism, surely they would condemn the assassination of a political opponent. No.
Yes, they did cut the bullshit. Obama, Biden, Kamala Harris, Bernie Sanders, and pretty much every major Democrat came out and condemned the shooting and the political violence against Charlie Kirk. Meanwhile, the right twisted the shooting into a pretext for stroking more political violence against the left.
Many of them celebrated it, like Charlie Sheen on World AIDS Day, and that's just about as fascist as Putin's pierogies, which is not only a food, it's what he calls his housekeepers. Now, I've heard people say, well, technically that's not fascism because the government didn't assassinate the political opponent. Wow, nuance. I'm glad the people that called Sydney Sweeney a Nazi for wearing jeans learned what that is. Now, for the record, just because her bra size is SS doesn't mean she's Goebbels. Now, it wasn't just the left. The right, the party that ended cancel culture, the party that is keeping free speech alive. Surely they maintain their values in the face of tragedy? No, they folded faster than a pair of Peter Dinklage's dungarees. Jimmy Kimmel, who, for anyone under 50, is a late-night TV hosts. And for anyone under 40, late night TV is how the pharmaceutical industry gets your uncle hooked on opioids. And for anyone under 30, TV is like TikTok, but your phone is sideways and not controlled by Bamboo Babe Ruth. Anyway, Jimmy's show is taken off the air because he allegedly made a joke about Charlie. I watched the segment. You watched the segment. He did not make a joke about Charlie at all. The joke was about Trump and one of his reactions to Charlie's death, which was ridiculous. He started talking about White House renovations, which if he hadn't kicked out all the Mexicans would have been done by now. Now, I will say Jimmy did spread misinformation about Charlie's killer, saying that he was right-wing. I don't know how right-wing you can be if your girlfriend has a cock. We'll have to ask Lindsey Graham about that. Rumor is he likes devouring a devious bull-nosed cock. Now, in all seriousness, I'm pretty sure the only thing leaning to the right in that relationship was his girlfriend's big salty cock. But furthermore, if spreading misinformation is worthy of cancellation, then just get rid of the internet right now. Personally, I think it's a violation of free speech and incredibly corny to hire a comedian and fire them for jokes no matter which side of the aisle those jokes land on. There is always going to be someone offended by a joke. Half the population is female. And if you got offended by that, you're proving my point. If we set a precedent that we silence comedians when people are offended, there will be no comedy at all, and my feet are not nice enough to start an OnlyFans. But let's say that you disagree. ABC is a private company. They should be able to hire and fire as they choose. I've heard people say freedom of speech isn't freedom of consequence, and that is fair. But is ABC simply firing an employee over a joke they didn't like? Or is it Trump's FCC Chair Brendan Carr going on a podcast the next day saying Jimmy Kimmel should be punished and saying we can do this the easy way or the hard way, which is what Tyler Robinson's girlfriend said on their first date when she whipped out that vindictive, conniving cock with salt all over it Himalayan? Well, you know what happened immediately after? Nexstar, one of the largest affiliate owners in the country, meaning they broadcast Jimmy Kimmel's show, they pulled Kimmel from all their broadcasts. Now, do you think they did that because they were offended by the joke or because they have a $6.2 billion merger they need approved by the FCC? If they did it for that merger, that is the definition of government influence silencing of speech. And now all these staunch free speech advocates are doing mental gymnastics to get around the fact that they're okay with government influence silencing of speech as long as it's for their opposition. You want to know who wouldn't be okay with that? Charlie Kirk. Love him or hate him, Charlie gave a microphone to his political opponents, asked audiences to treat them with respect. He quite literally amplified the voices of those he disagreed with. How do you think he would feel about his tragic death being used to silence political opposition? Honestly, do you think that he would advocate for canceling Jimmy? There's no way. I think he'd be furious about it. I think his supporters should be furious about it, and I think his detractors should be furious about it. It shouldn't even be up for debate.
So Schulz is running the classic centrist play, blaming both sides as if they're equally guilty, which is complete bullshit. The guy who tried to gut the First Amendment by going after Jimmy Kimmel was Trump. You've never seen the left drag the government into silencing someone who criticized them. At worst, it's just outrage on Twitter, which is nowhere near the same thing. Now, I'll give them this, at least they spoke up, they didn't stay silent, and for that I'll give them some credit, but let's not kid ourselves, the reason they did it is because this one hit too close to home. Jimmy Kimmel is a politically outspoken comedian, so are Joe Rogan, Andrew Schulz, and Tim Dillon. The only difference is the side they choose to back, and that's why this was a wake-up call. If it can happen to Kimmel, it can absolutely happen to them. Now, will they ever go all in on criticizing Trump? Personally, I wouldn't get my hopes up. Every once in a while, Rogan, Dillon, and Schulz will toss out a rare criticism of Trump, but it never lasts. They always run back to the same script of, we like Trump, Trump is better than the Democrats. Now, at the end of the day, this whole situation shows exactly what we've been saying all along. Trump and his allies don't actually care about free speech, they only care about protecting themselves from criticism. The second a comedian, a late night host, or even one of their own turns the spotlight on them, they move to silence it right away.